Good evening, Sello. I would imagine this was an awful shock. Just tell us how her family is doing this evening.
Good evening, Sally. It was a shock to wake up to the news of the passing of someone that is really so strong, and to then have to endure the pain of knowing that these are the kind of people who carried our democracy on their, or the struggle for democracy on their shoulders. One is reminded, and the foundation used the archive to remind South Africans and the world of the kind of relationship that Madiba enjoyed with his daughter. In a letter that he wrote in 1969, we note how halfway through the letter he says, I've heard that how Zindzi's heart is sore, and how she wants to know when I will come back. He says, I do not know, my darlings, when I will return. But I'm looking forward to spending the rest of my living years in happiness with you. In another letter, he was proud to hear from a colleague who said that, look, your daughter, I saw your daughter, and she's doing so well. She's rock solid, they said. And it's that rock solid nature that Madiba it really loved and enjoyed. And I think Anand Singh described her as her mother's daughter. And I think she was indeed, because she was rock solid. And the family is devastated, as we are all as South Africans. And I'm hoping that the world will remember Zindzi as a soft-hearted human being, someone who really cared deeply about the poor, about those who are vulnerable to poverty, to abuse, and that we honor her.
And her death made so much more poignant because this is Madiba's birthday month, of course, but also on this day, 51 years ago, in 1969, Madiba's son, Temekile, died in a car accident. I mean, it's just extraordinarily sad.
It is. In fact, this morning, as I was speaking to the firstborn child of Ndade Temekile, Sis Ndilega, she said, as we were chatting about this moment and what the day would mean, we both had goosebumps as we were thinking about how here's Madiba's moment of pain, how he wrote to Zindzi in another letter, saying how devastated he was, and that at the time of his death, both Madiba and Winnie were in prison. And you can imagine the suffering of Zindzi and the other siblings. And I'm hoping that South Africans never forget the journey that we've traveled to get this democracy to play around with.
You said that she was very much Winnie's daughter, and she was just a little one, I think about 18 months old, when her father was in prison. And she was subjected to being sent off to Brandford, so she suffered along with her mum, and she had such a very difficult time. What kind of adult was she? You know, she seemed to be a combination of very strong and outspoken, but also incredibly soft-hearted and kind.
Well, very kind. Very, very kind. You know, it was lovely to also enjoy watching her with Madiba. I remember this one moment in 2010 when we were launching the book Conversations with Myself, and she came in to be in conversation with Ahmed Kathrada and Madiba. And as they were sitting down, Zindzi then paged through the book, went to a story of Madiba's training while she was underground. And as she was reading this moment of how Madiba used the gun, and Madiba burst out laughing. And we were all wondering, what's so funny? He then said, look, you know, I remember that day so well. What you don't know is that the commander asked me, is this your first time using a gun? Because he hit the target first time. And he said, I said, yeah, it's the first time. The commander was blown away about the training that he had given Madiba. And he then laughed again. He said, looking at Zindzi, he said, look, what he didn't know is that I had handled the gun before. And she had, in response, she was so generous. She said, well, it must have been because in your very true nature, you wanted him to feel good about the training that he did. And they laughed about that moment. And I think If we are to do anything about our democracy, if we are to do anything about this legacy of Zindzi, we must fight racism. She was one of those who thought racism should never be tolerated. It must be eradicated. Let's eradicate it. She didn't have time for xenophobia. She didn't have time for gender-based violence. May we then deal with these social ills, including corruption, which she really abhorred. May we do everything possible to deal with these social ills.
Absolutely. So many questions around what happened and how she died. There has been some suggestion that it's going to be to see if she died of COVID-19. Are you in any position at this stage, Selo, to tell us the circumstances of her death and what actually caused her death?
I wouldn't know. So the family has asked that they will give any details that's necessary. So I think we should afford them the space to be able to do so. And I think it's a moment like this that all of us should be just devastated and asking ourselves, how do we mark such a legacy? How do we grow this legacy?
Absolutely. And can you tell us how her children are doing this evening?
The struggle. I tried to get hold of Zondo. I haven't been able to, because you can understand it's a very difficult moment for them, as it is for all of us. Some of us who have worked with Zindzi and journeyed with her for a short period were devastated this morning. I can imagine for them it must be worse.
And of course, we have restricted funeral arrangements. Do you have any details at this stage of how the funeral is going to happen, when it's going to happen?
No, we don't. So we will be getting those details from the family as soon as they are available.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing such beautiful memories with us this evening. That's the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Selo Hatang.